No, it had to, yeah.
Oh, second this week.
But it had to back on
The
the
important part was on the
second
second
floor.
floor.
Could be.
I just turned it over.
I
By that building being by itself, it doesn't look like it. By that building, see, it doesn't have any building on one side of it.
Well, it took her early enough, but I just came by. He had two buildings. That's the one where the notions and the music store was, and the jewelry store and the fancier stuff was up where Penguins was later.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming out. Please welcome our speaker, Charlotte Sellers. She retired as local history specialist from the Jackson County Public Library and is the current Jackson County genealogist and former Jackson County historian. She is the author of Saving Seymour Stories, Tales from the First 50 Years, which are stories retold from the Seymour Museum. Please hold any questions or additional information until the end of Charlotte's program. Then she will take your questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. You might want to sit on this side if you want to see.
Okay.
Okay, well, indeed, as she said, thank you for coming out on a rainy, rainy night. Looks like it's not going to get much better out there, the last I saw. Okay, how many of you recognize one or more of these characters? I mean, I don't expect you to know them personally, it's just, okay. So I'm going to start, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you
Good.
fine.
Okay. Why don't you move up if you can? Yeah, move up if you can't hear. Because I can't shout any louder.
Do you have a microphone on it?
I don't know that we have one anymore. That we can plug in both ways. Yeah, it's built into this, but yeah, okay. So, okay, well, let's start across there. We have the engineer, Hezekiah Cook Seymour, otherwise known as H.C. Seymour, for whom the city of Seymour, or the town at the time of Seymour, was named. And below him we have Dr. J.R. James Jesse Jasper Roland Monroe, who owned the Seymour Times. Next is lawyer Samuel W. Holmes, who was always between Monroe and Brown because Monroe and Holmes were probably best friends, and Holmes and Brown were law partners at one time. And they didn't all always get along well, but they got along. I love that Dr. Monroe often referred to Lawyer Brown as little Jason B. Brown because they were both short. So I don't know why he felt it necessary, but he did. Okay, Detective Barmore. That's kind of where I'm going to go tonight with that, and also into a little bit about Jason B. Brown, not so much about the others. Basically, I ran out of time and space to go all those places. Detective Barmore, we'll talk more about. But notice on this page that his name is crossed out. This is a death record from, I believe, Buchanan County, Michigan. And he's in there twice, and both times he's crossed out. And there's sort of a question about whether he really was buried or not, but we'll get back into that. And then Merchant Harding, I don't know much about, except that he is Meedy Shields' great-grandfather, and had a mercantile here in Seymour on 2nd Street. He eventually joined with Will Irwin, who was in Columbus, or Irwin Music Bank, okay? And they opened a music and those other things. A music store anyway in Evansville. Expanded the business here, and I believe that Harding also had a place in Columbus, at least for a while. The thieves and clowns, we're not even going to get much into tonight because, again, I ran out of time and space. So, okay, let's move on to some other people that, okay, here we go, that you've probably heard of. You've lived in Seymour long at all, you've heard of Meedy and Eliza Shields. Okay. Well, let's just go on with that. Meedy Shields timeline. He was born in Tennessee to James Shields and Penelope White, so therefore he is Meedy White Shields. The family moved to Harrison County when he was about 6 years old in 1811. From 1820 to 22, he operated a flatboat on the White, Ohio, and Mississippi rivers. He and Wilkes and Reno frequently clashed with one another and ended up in court. And they were charged with the fray at one point and fined $6 each, so they were equally guilty. In 1832, at the beginning of the Black Hawk War, he enlisted in the militia as a first lieutenant and was promoted to captain during the war. Not much of a war, but during the war. And for their ever after was called Captain Shields. In 1830, okay, well, I forgot his name. He was married to Eliza Penelope Ewing on August 18, 1833. He was 28 years old. And in 1834, he was called into J.P. Court at Rockford and accused of fathering her child. Which I only learned about this at the end of last week, but I thought, well, this is interesting, so I got to check it out a little bit. You guys might want to move your chairs over if you can't see the screen. Okay. Okay, we'll get back to that in a minute here. First child of Meedy and Eliza was Lycurgus Livingston Shields, born May 19th of 1834. And that name has passed on down through the family. There are currently 2 Curb Shields living in Cincinnati area, and Curb came over, the older one, and did Section C, took pictures of the graves, listed the people that are there and their years, and did a little research on them, provided the information to the library, among other things that he's done. Okay. In 1837, and this went on for a while too, there were records in Congress that Lieutenant Shields and others lost horses from buffalo. There was a buffalo stampede near their camp, and their horses ran off. So they wanted to be reimbursed for the loss of the horses. And it took a long, long time, but the government said, yeah, he was careless. So he didn't get reimbursed. In 1846, he was elected as a state representative from the Jackson County area. He was 41 years old. In 1850, he saw the possibilities coming with the railroads, and I think he probably saw before that, like when he was in the State House, and I'm sure there was talk. But he, on the other hand, had to figure things out, so, I mean, it's not like it was just, oh, well, I guess it could have been just handed to him, but I don't think so. I think he saw the possibilities of what if the new East-West Railroad crossed the North-South Railroad on his property, what was likely to happen there? Yeah, well, maybe a town. So in 1850, he bought land between 7th and Bruce Streets here in Seymour, before the railroads were generally known. In 1852, he became a state senator, and he also, along with Eliza, laid out the original plat of Seymour. And here we go. Okay. In 1853, he opened a general store. He imported some fine mule stock that you may have heard of the mule crossing, where his stock got out on the railroad from time to time. Okay. And he enticed the railroad to build on his property rather than Rockford a few miles to the north. And my understanding is that the people at Rockford would not pay the railroad essentially to build across their land, but he not only furnished the land, but the fill to build the railroad up. And if you've noticed down there by Grassland Mercer behind them, I mean, that fill must be as tall as this room. It's really high. I'm impressed. Okay. Meedy was not a member of any denomination that we know of, but he offered churches money to come in and build in Seymour, offered them a lot, free lot, I believe $300. He didn't have a lot of formal education, but he learned from his wife, according to things that have been written since then. She was Presbyterian, and a traveling preacher's diary reports that on November 18th, he arrived in Seymour on horseback at dark and stopped with Captain Shields. He was reelected to the legislature in 1856 and sponsored a bill that said trains have to stop when train tracks crossed. And at that point, by that time, the north-south railroad was here first, and then by that time, the east-west road was at least as far as Seymour. It may not have gone on west yet, I can't remember. Okay, in the 1860 census, he identifies himself as a farmer and stockman with real estate valued at $80,000 and personal property of $15,000. In 1861, he and Sam Holmes addressed a crowd of men to leave for Indianapolis by train after the fall of Fort Sumter, reaching Seymour or Jackson County by telegraph. Information. In 1863, when it appeared that John Hunt Morgan's people might be a threat to Seymour, he got on his horse, Old Wheeler, and paraded the local militia that he had formed up and down 2nd Street so that they could repel Morgan's men, maybe. In 1866, he died February 6th of inflation of the stomach, buried at the Old Shields burial ground, which became the city cemetery. And his monument, at least, and maybe him, were moved to Riverview Cemetery in 1892. He left an estate of $350,000. And Eliza died the following November. Okay. A few words about research. I know most of you have done some research here and there on your families and so on. So I thought you might find this of interest. This book has been here in the library for a while, and I don't really know the source of it. And it's all moldy, and probably it's not something you really want to get into and mess with, but I believe it was Charlie Norman who scanned it in, and the library was kind enough to give me a copy. It turns out that it's a JP record from Reading Township in 1834 to about 39. And those are the pages you can see. There's like 230-some pages in there of this old handwriting. It's water damaged, it's faded, and so on. But the first page I opened was this page, which I'm sure you can't see to read. But some of the pages were like the one over there. Some of them were better, like the one here. But the one like that was the first one I opened. And this is the fourth scan of the first readable page. And it says, Constable of the County aforesaid, returnable forthwith and afterwards tried on the 8th of March in the year aforesaid. The said warrant was returned by the said P.C. Parker, Police Constable Parker, executed as commanded by taking the said Meedy W. Shields and having him forthwith before me. And now at this time, to wit, on the same day last aforesaid, comes said Meedy Shields in the custody of Parker the constable, and pleads not guilty to the charge so exhibited against him by the said Polly Hammonds. And from the part that I saw, there was no charge. You don't know at this point what she's accusing him of. And the said Polly Hammonds being sworn and interrogated in the presence of said defendant and cross-examined by him, and I'm not sure if that him refers to the defendant or to JP. Anyway, they're talking about the charge and the case being fully heard and due deliberation thereupon being had. It is adjudged by me that the said Meedy Shields is the father of said child. It is therefore ordered that the said Meedy Shields enter into a recognizance in the sum of, and I couldn't read it, but I believe it says $200 based on later, with sufficient security to appear before the Jackson County Circuit Court the next term thereof, to be held on the first Monday in September next at the courthouse in Brownstown. And he has to post $200 bond to be sure that he'll show up.
What year was that?
1834, spring. He was married in the fall of 33. His first kid was born in May of 34.
Was that charge?
Well, at this point, you don't know. But you sort of want to follow it to the next step, which is in the circuit court. So, okay, I find it in the circuit court in the September term of 1834, and I've taken it's at the bottom of the first page there and the top of the second page. And to make it a little easier to read maybe, but still not really all that readable, it's September 2nd, 1834, the Honorable John H. Thompson, presiding judge, Thomas Ewing and Morgan Huff, associate judges. Now, I don't know about Thompson and Huff. What?
Who's Thomas Ewing?
Well, that's my next question, yeah.
Is that his relation?
I would think so, but that's not mentioned at this point. So, okay, and then it says State of Indiana versus Meedy Shields in a case of bastardy, which is misspelled. Now, at this time, came the prosecuting attorney and the defendant by his counsel to move the court for a continuance of this cause on the ground that the papers were not filed on the first day of the term, which I assume was the day before. Which motion, after argument and consideration of the court, is sustained, and then they had is sustained twice and crossed out. And said cause is continued, to which opinion of the court the defendant accepts. And you'll notice there's no period at the end of that first sentence there, but there's still room at the bottom of the page. And then at the top of the next page, there's this, and sometime after returning into court, the following verdict to wit, lead the jury. Lead the jury? What jury? Find the defendant guilty and assess his fine at 50 cents. It is therefore considered by the court that the said defendant make his fine of 50 cents to the state of Indiana for its use of the Jackson County Seminary and pay the costs of this prosecution and stand committed until the said fines are paid or reclaimed.
So, do you really think that's the rest of that, or was there a page?
Oh, hang on.
Oh.
Being patient. But I mean, paid to the cemetery, if, you know, not to the woman who isn't even, I don't think she's even named. At this point, she isn't even named. Okay.
But that, wait, one thing I find out is that the seminary was here in 1834, which I had no clue that it was that early.
Well, and apparently before that, but I don't know, because that's not something I've looked into.
Oh, I see some words. No, I'm surprised that they, it's that one that was over the hillside there.
Okay, this one says, State of Indiana on the complaint of Polly Hammond, and this time with no S. I can't find Polly Hammond or even a Hammond family anywhere within spitting distance.
Like in the census.
Yeah, I mean, she wouldn't be there, but a family by that name, you would think, unless she was a stepchild, possibly. I mean, we don't know her age, we don't really know anything about her. Okay, versus Meedy Shields. absent Judge Thompson, came as well the attorney prosecuting the, and I think it says plea, on the state on the behalf of the defendant in his proper person, and also by his counsel, and the issue being made upon the plea of not guilty. Thereupon came a jury to wit, and it names Frederick Miller, Abraham Miller, Lewis Lanning, William Lockman, Albert Owen, Owen Owen, James L. Murphy, Hugh Moore, James Mitchell, Reuben May, Elisha Sanderson, and Joseph Crane, 12 good and lawful men who being elected, tried, and sworn. Yeah, elected, tried, and sworn, well and truly to try the issue, joined upon their oath, do say that they find the defendant not guilty. And thereupon, the counsel for the state moved the court to set aside the verdict herein and grant a new trial for the following reasons. And then here, there's a here insert. If you've ever looked at court records, they a lot of times won't have the information you want. They say here insert, and you're supposed to go find the folder that it's in, except the folders in our courthouse are sort of in a mess. So I've about given up finding anything there until they're someday sorted out, I know. Anyway,
So is that the next page, Charlotte, after those other two pages?
it's not the next page, it's the next entry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But how did you find that? Did you just
There's
look in
an
the index?
Yeah.
Just wondering.
And there are other entries for Meedy Shields in there. I mean, this is not. He was in court a lot, I think. He might have enjoyed it. Okay, Saturday, March 7th, 1835. What were we in before? September of 34. Okay. So here we are in 6 months later.
Well, yeah, they didn't hold court every day, though.
No, but still, just saying, if there's a baby there, and the thing is, we don't know. And the only reason is, well, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons it's of interest is, did Meedy Shields have another child? Was it a boy or a girl, or was this whole thing made out of whole cloth? That's what I was trying to find out, because I think it would be interesting if he had another kid out there somewhere. It'd be interesting to find out what happened to that child. Okay, so comes the attorney prosecuting the pleas of the state in behalf, and also the defendant and his proper person in my counsel. And the motion heretofore made by the counsel for the state for a new trial being signed and the same duly considered, it is considered that the motion be sustained and new trial granted, to which opinion and decision of the court, the defendant by his counsel accepts and files the following exceptions. Here considered. I may go look for those yet, I don't know. Okay, so I got to the last numbered page that's there for him. I don't remember the page number that's on the next slide. This is what I come to, only this is darker than what I saw. I mean, I could barely tell who was writing on the page, but I could see the two X's. So I took a picture of it, and I took it home, and I'm not very good with Photoshop, but I brought it up to see, and I wasn't sure if it was the top of the page or the bottom. Well, it turns out it's the bottom. And it says, thereupon something, defendant maybe motions the court to, and they crossed out the word grant, and put in set aside something verdict, and grant a new trial for, and it may say reasons, filed. And I love the way they spell bastardy in this one, which is different than the other. It's B-A-S-T-E-R-D-A. Okay, so Meedy comes the attorney who prosecutes the plea of the state in this behalf, and the defendant in his own proper person, and the presiding judge being heretofore interested in this cause as counsel for the defendant. So that would be Meedy's attorney in the previous proceedings. Okay. The defendant, prosecutes the plea. Being interested in this cause as counsel for the defendant. And Morgan Huff, one of the associate judges of said, and I assume I don't know, defendant, something, having become related to the complainant since the last term of this court. By consent of the parties, this case has been into Washington. Believe me, someday I'm gonna go to Washington County, see what else I can find.
There's not a better records down there.
Well, they have, yeah, some of theirs are better and some are not. But at least we found some of them that we thought weren't there before, which is pretty good. So, okay, so that's about, till I continue it to another day, that's about all I know at this point. But I thought it was interesting, worth following up.
Hey Charlotte, I want to tell you that one of Abraham's son, we might have read, ancestor. He was brought into court around that time, like 1832, 33, 34, and he was pled guilty to slander. And his father had to bring him in and say that he made a bond to go to his son, so he brought him in. Well, he had to pay $200 for just slandering a lady, for just, you know, I don't know, calling her a bad name. I don't know what
Things
name.
are, well, who knows?
But
Things
I'm
are
just
all over
saying,
the place.
but I'm just saying, that could be quite a bit of money that he was gonna pay out if that was really his job.
Well, yeah, but there's nothing, you know, at this point, there's no mention made. I mean, it's almost like she's irrelevant to the case as far as they're looking at it. Okay, another character, and I feel bad about calling it a character, but it is. The O&M played a big part in the development of, once it crossed in Seymour. So, okay, Meedy was elected in 1846. In 1848, the Indiana General Assembly chartered the O&M. In 1849, Cincinnati and St. Louis residents supported cash for O&M construction, and this was like $500,000 one place and $3 million, as I recall. I think it was St. Louis that put in the $3 million, which in that time I would have thought would have been a lot of money into it. So, okay. In 1851, the Cincinnati to Aurora section was soon to be commenced. Further extension to the valley of the East Fork of the White River will be put under contract as soon as it can be properly located. The Illinois survey is done and construction contracts left, so we're behind over here. Okay, this is a map from 1850, and you'll notice that it shows there's Vernon, there's Vincennes, there's Roxford, and there's Salem. There's no Brownstown listed, which I don't quite understand why that, but there's no, the crossing is below Rockford, and there's no Seymour mentioned, of course, but isn't that interesting that it might have already been in the works to go south? Okay. Now, notice the name at the bottom. I don't know if you can read it or not, but this is a notice to contractors that HC Seymour Company is going to take bids to let contracts for extending the railroad between Cincinnati and St. Louis. And we'll talk about HC Seymour some more. So, say that 3 times fast. From Cincinnati, okay, to Vincennes.
Hey, Charlotte, there's a lot of Irish people that came to work on the railroad. Where did they go?
That's not relevant at this point, okay? Well, we can talk about it later, okay? Okay. 1854, the opening of the Ohio and Mississippi Railroad to Aurora was celebrated yesterday. 1,100 guests, invited guests, left on 3 trains. There was a grand banquet at Aurora with several speeches and firing of cannon. 1855, another map, and now Seymour is there, but the road only comes from North Vernon to Seymour, and then there's just a dotted line to Mitchell and then on to Vincennes, so it hasn't been finished yet according to the map, which goes with the records. And then finally, we have the whole thing across the state from Cincinnati to Vincennes. Okay, so who was H.C. Seymour? Does anybody know anything much about him? Have you heard things about him? Well, did you ever wonder, I mean, he's not mentioned coming back for the celebration when the railroad reached here or when it went on through. and the town's named for him. I think he would have been happy about that. Well, it turns out that, well, let's go back a little bit. First of all, he's a New York guy, and he, in the spring of 1852, decided to leave his job as the New York State engineer and follow his interest in railroad contracts worth about $35 million. So I guess you could do that. Contracts for several projects were awarded to him with 3 majors, including the Ohio and Mississippi Railroad from Cincinnati to St. Louis, also the L&N and the Airline Road between New York and Boston. And you think of it at that time that people would have had a more concentrated area, but he was all over the east, well, northern part of the East Coast anyway.
Charlotte, this guy was real impressed with getting his name on towns. Seymour, Indiana, Seymour, Minnesota, Seymour, Texas,
I don't think so.
and his son in Seymour, Tennessee.
Don't think so. I'll look, but I don't think so. Because when were those other towns, when did they come about? And there's Seymour, Connecticut, and,
Well, that I don't know about, but the others I do know, that he was the engineer laying out the road.
okay, I have no evidence of him ever being in Texas. And not much in Minnesota. Anyway, he may have, I don't know.
I think they just like to they don't know what to name their town, so they just.
You know, well, what kind of upsets me is that people refer to him as Henry and Charles and whatever, and if you look at the contracts, and Fleta Arthur did a lot of research on this and found the contracts, and they're signed Hezekiah C. Seymour, or Ezekiel maybe the way it would be pronounced today, I'm not sure. Anyway, he died 24 July 1853 at his home in New York. So the railroad line didn't open until 1854, 1856. So he never got to come back to his town. And there was no further connection. And that's what I always wondered, why didn't he show up occasionally and take credit for his town being named? So he was survived by a widow, 1 son, and 5 daughters, and there was high praise for his engineering abilities proclaimed in his obituaries. Skip forward to 1914, when his daughter, Eliza Seymour Hoffman, or depending on who you're asking, was invited to see the building of the Farmers Club. And she was a writer. She had written several things. She was 75 years old when she was invited to this opening of the Farmers Club. And she had written and published religious tracts and edited them for years. Anyway, it appears that she did not come. But what's also interesting is that in this report of her being invited, it says her father's name was Henry C. Seymour. And I don't know if Hezekiah, if there's a, you don't call him Hezi probably, or Kai, I don't know. So maybe Henry was a nickname for Hezekiah. But I find that really interesting because in the census, I followed this family through to his death and then on past followed the kids down. And he was Hezekiah in the census. Okay, back to the compelling characters. Now we're half done, but we're not even getting started. So let's talk just a little bit about J.R. Monroe. He came with his family. He was born in New Jersey about 1825, and I say about because different censuses, his age, he seems to get younger and younger as the censuses go by. Yeah, as good as you can do it. And you'll notice that, the picture's a big deal because for years I hadn't seen a picture of him, and I put something on RootsWeb or, I don't know, maybe Ancestry, maybe both, saying I would like a picture of J.R. Monroe. The State Library didn't have one, the Historical Society said they didn't have one. So, well, a person who likes to get pictures back to people that are researchers, she likes to match them up. So she saw what I had written on there and shot me an email and said, "Are you still interested?" And I said, "Yeah." So she basically found this in a Monroe County antique shop, and it says at the top, May 1st, 1880, and at the bottom is handwritten Dr. J.R. Monroe, editor Seymour Times, Seymour, Indiana. And the back of it says Platter and Sons, Seymour, Indiana. So I'm pretty sure it's a legitimate picture, and I've got a drawing of his son, Victor Hugo Monroe, who looks very similar to this. In fact, I almost wondered if they made a drawing from the photo, but this is the only photo, verified photo, that I have seen of him. And it's kind of strange because you may know, he started the Seymour, well, he started the Rockford Herald in 1855, because we lived in Rockford at that time. In 1857, Meedy Shields made him some sort of offer he couldn't refuse, so he moved to Seymour and was very supportive of Seymour for years and years. But I find it very interesting that when Shields died in 1866, he put a notice in about his death, but he said, I want to write a longer piece next week. Well, I know how it goes not to get things done that you want to get done, but what happened to the piece on Seymour, it's not there, or on Shields, it's not there.
So you have a copy of the next week that it's not?
It's not there. At least I need to go back and look again, but I didn't see it.
Sounds like they were glad he was gone, left us this fast.
But notice 1866, you know what happened in 1866? That he died in February.
The Reno's?
Well, there had been Renos out there suspected of, but not really mentioned that much before. But there were things going on in the county that were kind of not good things as far as people continuing to live and live in peace. So I wondered if Meedy had somehow sort of kept things under control. But the other thing I was going to say there is that I don't think Monroe was particularly fond of him, and yet he never spoke against him in there. So there's a lot of things that I want to dig deeper into to see what exactly was going on.
And they used the newspapers to back me back.
Oh, yeah. Little Jason D. Brown.
Is he a real physician?
Yeah.
Just
No, he had an excellent reputation.
as a physician?
He left his paper in the care of Sam Holmes for either 6 months or 18 months, I'm not really clear, and went to Louisville and graduated with distinction because he had only read in other doctors' offices after that point. So in the late 1850s, he went to Louisville and got some sort of authority. Yeah. But he is recognized, and let's go on to the Civil War. He went into the 50th Indiana Volunteer Infantry as a surgeon, and he didn't get along with the head of the unit because that guy was sort of a copperhead, and I won't go into the details there. But long story short, he was in a very short time and asked to be transferred to another unit, and he was. But he covered a length of, and alone, and I find this hard to believe, of about 400 miles, supposedly, where there were wounded and sick spread out over 400 miles. No person could do that, I would think. Well, anyway, long story short, after a few months, he wore out, he became paralyzed on one side, and eventually had to resign his commission in the Army. He came back home, and meanwhile, did I say that Sam Holmes had taken over his paper, was running it for him. He came back, recovered a little bit, and Governor Morgan would telegraph him from time to time. Those are online, you can see the telegrams that were sent. And says, can you round up some doctors and come help us, we need help. So he would send Monroe would get on the train with some other doctors from this area, and they would go down into Tennessee and worked for a while. Stones River was one of the places that he helped out. When he came back from the war, though, he was a very changed person. And I don't know what happened with his wife while he was gone. But they got a divorce, and I believe the war was still on. He married a younger woman, much younger woman, and I cannot find for sure who her parents are, but close your ears. Oh, you know, you're not doing Presley. Somebody's doing Presley Clark, and I think it was Presley Clark's daughter maybe that he married, but I can't prove that. I'm not sure. But she, I think, was Mary Clark. Mary Clark.
If I think they wrong.
Yeah. Anyway, they sort of lived happily ever after. And he was still friends with his wife, so I mean, it wasn't she did not remarry, but their younger son, Bernie, who was kind of a daredevil kid, fell off the cars, the railroad, and had his left leg was crushed off. And apparently Doc amputated it. And the kid for thereafter always went around with the crutch, but he was still off on trains. Anyway, a few years later, he died of some kind of, they think, infection. Not from, well, not, who knows whether it was connected to the leg or not. But anyway, he died, and Monroe writes very nicely about him, but also about his life. I mean, I think it's nice that, you know, he's not trashing her, and he mentions her in the story about her. But anyway, it's kind of sad. And in 1882, Doc decided to have enough of this place because he was an infidel. And you know what that was back in the day? He was a church, among other things. He pretty well put down the church. But people still liked him because he was a good person. He was kind to people. He helped them. He didn't charge them to do stuff. In fact, he was usually in debt or at least needing money. He fed people. You know, if somebody was without food, he would take food to their house, stuff like that. Anyway, it's a long story about him. But he left in 1882. Now, okay, Joe Kling, K-I-N-G-E, was an infidel also, and there were some others around here, and they had sort of a group going. But even people that were in the church didn't dislike him. They found him, I don't know, they got along with him. Some of them, apparently there was, and I never have found out yet from the paper why he decided at this point I've had enough, I'm getting out. I mean, he says that, but he doesn't say exactly why.
So now, was that the only paper in Seymour?
No. There was a Seymour Democrat at some point, which at some point Sam Holmes ran. There was a Seymour Sun, which Holmes started, and at some point, like 1869, I think, and in 1870 maybe, he moved it to North Vernon and became the North Vernon Sun. But anyway, this is from the Brownstown Banner. Left us at last. Dr. Monroe left on Monday.
Oh, that's terrible.
No, it's great. I mean,
Left us at last.
well, because he threatened for months. I mean, if you read back in the
Oh,
papers
okay.
in November and December,
Oh, he was lingering.
he'd been talking about it, and finally, well, I suppose he had to make room, you know, a place up there for his building and his press and stuff.
Oh, he didn't die. I thought that meant he died.
No, not yet. Dr. Monroe and family left on Monday for their new home in Indianapolis. The doctor expects to publish the first number of volume 27 of the Times in its cozy quarters in the Times building, number 70, North Illinois Street, on April 1st. I love that. There are a good many people in Seymour that thought the doctor didn't amount to anything here, but that he would not be missed. But since they begin to realize the situation, some of these same persons say they now realize their mistake. The truth is, the doctor was not treated by some people as he ought to have been. While he may have had his faults and peculiar notions, the rest of mankind have theirs. But people need not grieve over his mood. Now it's too late. If proper appreciation had been shown, this would not have occurred. The doctor is gone, his family are gone. The only consolation left is that possibility their kind of pleasant voices may be heard here once in a while hereafter. So occasionally people would send for him to come take care of them when they were sick, and he would come down on the train and get a horse, rent a horse from the delivery and go treat people. He also, by this time, I said that he had changed when he came back from the war. You can see in the paper he transfers from the way he was reporting things to, which is of course different than the way things were reported in the 50s and 60s and 70s here too. But anyway, reported differently, wrote long pieces, and he had published things all along, poetry and play and some things. And a play was even put on here that he had written. But he also, his Seymour Times, as an infidel paper, was going to atheists all over the country. And he had earned quite a reputation. He would go off and speak with Robert Ingersoll, who was one of the other, was probably the major leader of the infidels. When he moved the paper to Indianapolis, he renamed it The Ironclad Age, and in parentheses after that on the masthead, the Convoluted Seymour Times. And anyway, why the picture is such a big deal. At that point, people were asking him, according to him, for his picture. So he sent pictures out to people all over the country. Why can I not find a picture from that time period? I mean, you'd think they'd be out there all over the place.
Is the Pattern Sons that it was at the backside of that?
Yeah, but I don't know if that's the picture he sent out all over the country. And I'd love to know who wrote in the little tiny print on there that that's, is J.R. Monroe. Because otherwise we'd have had no clue. And different things make me think that is indeed an authentic picture. So
And what year did he go to Indianapolis?
1882. And I guess I didn't put his funeral on here, but the funeral edition, you know how papers turn the rules when somebody important died, and it would be black lines instead of white guidelines. They turned the rules on the paper, and somebody from Chicago came down to do his funeral. And there are all kinds of accolades for him, not from his family, but from friends and people, even people that disagreed with him would write in what a great guy he was. And if I had time, I would put those in here, but I don't have it. I would also forgot that I was going to put in the banner from the Ironclad Age, so you can see, because he's got drawings of people in flames on one side and a family setting on the other. He was something. Okay, let's spend just a few minutes on.
So now he didn't sell that paper, he just left it.
Right, when he died in 1891, one or two, his daughter took it over. And she was a typesetter, and she didn't like that the guys that they hired, the printers, devils, couldn't do the work well, so she just, get rid of them, I'll do it. So she did it, yeah. And then she took it over. She also was a physician, but she also took over the paper when he died. Okay, Jason B. Brown's funeral in 1898. Can I not put a date on there? 97 or 98, I've got it in my notes, but I haven't used it yet, so I start now. Okay, his funeral, according to the, well, I thought I put that on there too. I believe this was in an Indianapolis paper, said that Jason B. Brown's funeral, greatest event of the kind ever witnessed in Seymour. Yeah, well, first of all, he was,
Honorable to the dead.
no, he was a lawyer, but he first was elected to the state legislature, both as a representative and later as a senator. And then he went to Congress also as a representative. And it's interesting.
Is that the state or the federal government?
Federal, yeah, U.S. Senator. And his funeral was a big deal because they ran a special from Bedford special train over so that people could attend his funeral. There was a procession that, first of all, they took him from his house to the Methodist church, and then they took him from the Methodist church, I believe, back to the house, and then from the house to the Presbyterian church, and from the Presbyterian church to Riverview. He was well traveled. But there were, apparently hundreds, if not thousands, of people here for his funeral. He was much married. I couldn't find a date for his first marriage. I suspect it was in Dearborn County. And I found one place that referred to, in the Aurora paper, referred to her as Laura E. She died in 1862. And if he was, I forget when he was born, but he would have been in his 20s. So in 1863, toward the end of 1863, he married Maggie F. Ross of Clark County, and she died September 10th, 1870, after the August 17th birth of Margaret R. Brown. Anybody ever heard of Margaret R. Brown?
Oh, well. I knew her.
You knew her, okay.
In fact, I remember she gave me a skippy scooter when I was probably 4 or 5 years old.
Okay, cool. Okay, his next wife, she died in 1870. In 1871, he married Nellie Ballard Perkins. Meanwhile, in 1872, he had, because of Nellie Ballard Perkins, who was I gotta get this parties right here. She was a Republican, and you remember back in the day, the Republicans were on the side of most things the Democrats are on these days, and vice versa. The Democrats were the ones that wanted to preserve the Union with states' rights, essentially. Anyway, without going into a lot of that, she persuaded him to change parties. So he'd been this great orator that went out there because he was apparently a very good speaker. And he went out everywhere, and when he married her, she convinced him to change to a Republican Party. And Governor Morton, who by that time was Senator Morton, U.S. Senator Morton, wanted to be reelected, and he needed Brown's help. So Brown went out and stumped for him and everything. And in return for that, he's alleged to have gotten $6,500, of which $3,000 might actually have been paid. But this is just in a paper. I don't know whether it's true or not. And also promised him the secretary, he could become secretary of Wyoming Territory, which he did. We've got the paper. The library has the paper upstairs, his appointment as secretary of Wyoming Territory. So anyway, that was 1871, he married Nellie. 1872, they went to Wyoming Territory. 1873, the Brownstown Banner reported the death of Nellie Brown in Wyoming Territory. And in the same issue, Brown writes about being pleased with the area and invites his friends to come visit. I mean, he was obviously very sad and broken up about her death, or whatever it was. And then in 1876, he married Anna Shield, who was the daughter of the well-known John Shield, tanner in Brownstown and Seymour. And you may have seen this house down at 3rd and Park Street on the northeast corner. That was his house. It was built for the two of them. And she is in the picture, along with Margaret R. And I finally figured out who the others are. I can't remember. I think it's Art Kaufman, maybe, his wife, or daughter. I'm not sure. Better quit calling it. But anyway, it was the neighbors that were there. Okay, this is a story from the Chicago Weekly Sentinel.
In Chicago?
Chicago, which mentions that a woman, the headline reads, this is December 24th, day before December 25th, okay? A woman with a past, Mrs. Nellie Ballard Brown, the sweet singer, and her pending suit. Her present appearance recalls an important political episode, a curious chapter in Indiana politics. Well, long story short, she apparently was an excellent singer, but she didn't like being out west, and when he wouldn't come back, she took off. And somebody heard her sing when she was posing for a picture, and the guy said, hey, I will pay you $200 a week in expenses to join an opera troupe, but we're going to travel the country. And, you know, she'd be the main person in it. Well, long story short, that guy couldn't get it together, and he died, so she sued his estate. Well, some reporter, some good reporter, remembered that about her whole thing with getting her husband to change parties and stomp for Governor Morton and all that good stuff. So when she came back, and apparently after this, well, okay, before the lawsuit, went to Europe to study music, and so Jason B. said that she had deserted him and he filed for divorce. Now, I haven't found a divorce suit. I suspect it's out in Wyoming territory, where the archives there called once upon a time to see what we knew about him. And of course, we didn't know a whole lot at that point, and it wasn't put together. It's still not put together. But anyway, he was quite an interesting person. And wherever he went, death seemed to follow him. I mean, how many wives has he lost now? Well, 2. That was good. Yeah. Okay, so in 1893, while he was in Congress, the stories on this side, one from the Washington Dispatch, says that Congressman Jason Brown of Seymour lives at the Riggs house in Washington. Saturday night while he was sleeping, his $400 watch, $150 or $180 in cash, and a bundle of railroad passes were stolen. He is grieving much over the passes. You know, they weren't supposed to have railroad passes. Nothing has changed from back in the day, you know. In as much as Jason, and then whatever, I think this was out of the Seymour. No, I'm not sure what paper. I gotta look on here and see. Anyway, the paper that took the original from the Washington Dispatch wrote, in as much as Jason generally goes to bed with his breeches on, the thief must have been an expert to rifle his pockets without awakening the snoring statesman. And they've got statesmen in quotes. We can well imagine the old sinner being heartbroken over the loss of his passes, which he carries in violation of interstate commerce law, and which qualify him to legislate so disinterestedly between the railroads and the people. Fine Congressman, that fine system. The only time we can tell how many railroad passes or telegraph francs they have in their pockets is when they are found dead or drunk. Then the passes stick out like maggots in an old cheese. The next time Jason retires so early in the evening from overjoy at capturing an office for a corporation henchman like Burke, he should not hang his pants on the floor, but check them at the office and walk upstairs dressed like a Chinaman. I don't understand that. And the other one there then from the Indianapolis Journal, reprinting a story from Washington, says essentially the same thing. And then the Brownstown Banner sort of comes off defending him. You know, it gives his side and doesn't really tell the Washington side. Yeah. Okay, and then, death following him. 1891, clerk from Jeffersonville that worked for him in his Washington office just suddenly, forget how this one, was supposed to have died of apoplexy. Retired to bed and was considered not feeling well. And there's story after story like this. There's a story about a constituent visiting hotel room, and he drops dead. And there's no investigation reported at least. Just, okay, people drop dead every day. Yeah. Okay. And that's the end of that. I can now start on this. No, I said I'd be done by 7:30, so I need some questions. Let's go that way. Or comments.
1 minute, you got it.
Yeah, there is. Oh, you had your hand up. There's so much about these people that is so interesting to me, at least, and I hope to others, that they were human beings, like just like people today.
The printed material is just like we see on Facebook today.
I was
Sounding off.
Things haven't changed.
Sounding off.
They haven't. They haven't. Except that with the newspaper editors more or less doing it back then. And you wonder how much of what was said, how much can you rely on and how much not. And I find, yeah, I think Monroe pretty well told it like it was, even if it hurt him.
And that was the center of communication. That's who you look to. That was whatever was came out of newspapers.
But sometimes the Democrat will tell a different story. And I've never seen the son. Who's the faces for homes. And I never did get to Mr. Harding, but maybe another day I will get to him. Who else did we have back there at the beginning? Oh, yeah. We pretty well got to everybody except the thieves and clowns. I still need to find more about Detective Barmore. If you put Seymour Barmore in Google, you'll come up with all kinds of things on him in Tennessee. But the fact that he's mentioned in Jackson County, first of all, Jason, when I say Jason B. Brown represented him in his divorce from his wife, Lissy, I cannot find anything about Lissy except letters, ads in newspapers for letters. There's a couple letters in a couple places for Lissy Brown after the divorce. There's ads in the Cincinnati paper where Barmore says he advertises his services as the world's greatest detective. And this guy, I mean, goes down to Tennessee and infiltrates the Klan, working for Governor Brownlow. And that's another, I want to get the microfilm of Brownlow's papers and see if I can find anything about him being hired. Why this guy? He apparently also lived in Columbus, but I really can't find him here. It's too early for city records. In 1860, he was living in Louisville, and then there's rumors online that he was in the Secret Service, which didn't start till the end of the war. There's no evidence that he worked for Pinkerton. Thank you. So how did Brownlow even know about him? And then, this is the part, if you've been listening, the people, some masked people, dragged him off a train in Pulaski County, Tennessee, and hanged him, shot him, stabbed him. His body was found in the Duck River with a rope still around his neck, I believe, and shot through the top of the head. This was 6 months or less. His divorce here was in August. This was in January of 1869, 1868. And remember what was going on in that time period is the hangings and stuff. And I'm trying to get a long enough timeline to see how all this stuff fits together. What was going on? Oh, and I forgot to mention the people that took him off the train wore scarlet masks. Who else wore scarlet masks?
And that's puppets.
Bingo. So, and was that, did the Klan always wear red masks, or was that peculiar to this area for going down to the Albany? And could this also, there's also speculation that these weren't Klansmen at all, that they were people trying to blame the Klansmen. He was really taken out for something else.
Well, I thought the Klan didn't start until like the 1920s or something.
It came back. It was started by Bedford Forrest right after the war. And then he got scared of when it started. And anyway, if you dig stuff up, let me know, because I'm always interested in hearing what you find out. And did you all see the Harding pictures that Meedy Shields brought in?
I can't hear you.
I asked if everybody saw the pictures that
Oh,
you
I
had
don't know.
brought in of his daughter Katie in S.V. Harding's first wife's wedding dress and her day after dress.
And his daughter's wedding dress
Yeah, okay.
and his wife's second day dress.
Yeah,
She
okay.
went home.
Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it and hope you enjoy it.
Why was not either one of those guys?
What's that?
Either of those guys don't look like decent lawyers. I guess.
Oh, okay, which one?
Sam was the mayor of.
That was Ida Harding Montgomery, that was S.B.'s daughter. Wedding dress. And this was Christiana's wedding, her second day dress. This is 27 yards of Indian silk.
So sorry, I watched for the first day after marriage.
Yeah.
And the most.
Is there articles about
Just
that?
when the Carter Schoolhouse burned, they were in the trunk in the schoolhouse. And we pulled it out while the fire was still going on. But it's been burning for probably an hour before we pulled it out.
I
We
could look.
opened the trunk a few days later, they didn't even smell.
Oh, wonderful.
That trunk had
His
been,
name was either Robert Neal or.
it had been opened once.
And I'm not sure if that's the right or the
I suppose
one of the names was identified by him.
probably mid-1970s. And it had been packed away in 1936 when my grandmother died.
Now, which one's the wedding dress? This one?
No, this one,
That's the wedding dress?
yeah.
I would have guessed the other way around, so I would have guessed wrong.
Well, the thing is, starting about 1900, everybody wore white. Before that, they wore all colors. This is the
Wasn't it
second
Queen
day
Victoria
dress.
who like started the
Now,
whole
what,
white
do you know
wedding
what color
dress
that was
thing?
originally or anything?
Yes, there was.
It's
Brown.
It's brown.
We're dead down here. Stephanie wants to
And
come
then
get
what,
the
is
camera.
this just a
And there were 14 total.
muslin or
We're
poplar?
No,
cut down.
this is Indian silk.
Thanks.
silk too?
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
They're both silk.
No, this is silk.
What's that made out of?
I don't know.
It's not shiny. Taffeta, you reckon?
Could be taffeta, it kind of has the appearance of that.
Look at all the, how long it will take to do all this. Yes.
I was wondering.
I wasn't there.
That's how
Probably no Katie. Of the kinds.
I don't think so.
Well, yeah, it went off there. See, I didn't hear you say it.
You remember Chuck Levin?
Billy, did you?
Yeah. His granddaughter used to watch it, maybe you know.
Yes, I saw it.
Well, thank you. I used to watch.